Question 1. Analysis of a situation where an employee at Webuild S.P.A. discovers that a potential new supplier for a critical project is owned by a close personal friend. The employee has significant influence over the supplier selection process. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the Webuild S.P.A. employee? Option A. Avoid any interaction with the supplier and inform colleagues that they cannot be involved in the selection process due to a perceived conflict, without providing specific details. Option B. Proceed with evaluating the supplier as usual, assuming personal friendship will not influence professional judgment, and do not disclose the relationship. Option C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to Webuild S.P.A.'s compliance department or relevant management, and recuse themselves from any decision-making related to the supplier selection. Option D. Discreetly advocate for the friend's company, highlighting their strengths in a way that might subtly steer the decision in their favor, while still maintaining a veneer of objectivity. Correct answer is C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to Webuild S.P.A.'s compliance department or relevant management, and recuse themselves from any decision-making related to the supplier selection. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Webuild S.P.A. due to the inherent conflict between personal gain and the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in navigating the potential for preferential treatment and the appearance of impropriety, which can undermine trust and lead to regulatory scrutiny. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions align with Webuild S.P.A.'s commitment to integrity and adherence to relevant laws and guidelines. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to the relevant internal compliance or management team. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and proactive risk management. By bringing the situation to light, the employee allows Webuild S.P.A. to implement appropriate safeguards, such as recusal from decision-making processes or enhanced oversight, thereby upholding the company's integrity and complying with principles of fair dealing and avoiding conflicts of interest. This aligns with general ethical principles of transparency and good corporate governance, which are implicitly expected in professional environments and often codified in company policies and industry best practices. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the business relationship without disclosure, hoping that the personal connection will not influence decisions. This fails to address the potential for bias, even if unintentional, and creates a significant risk of violating ethical standards and potentially company policy regarding conflicts of interest. It also fosters an environment where favoritism could be perceived, damaging internal morale and external reputation. Another incorrect approach is to subtly leverage the personal relationship to gain an advantage for the supplier. This is a direct breach of ethical conduct and likely violates Webuild S.P.A.'s policies against undue influence and bribery. Such actions can lead to severe legal and reputational consequences for both the individual and the company. A further incorrect approach is to avoid the situation entirely by refusing to engage with the supplier, even if they are the most qualified. While this might seem like a way to avoid conflict, it can be detrimental to business operations if the supplier is genuinely the best option. The ethical and professional response is to manage the conflict, not to abdicate responsibility without proper consideration. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of Webuild S.P.A.'s Code of Conduct and Conflict of Interest policies. When a potential conflict arises, the first step is to identify it. Then, assess the nature and severity of the conflict. The next crucial step is to disclose the conflict to the appropriate authority within the company. This allows for a formal review and the implementation of mitigation strategies. Throughout this process, maintaining transparency and acting with integrity are paramount. Question 2. The audit findings indicate a material discrepancy in the reported project costs for a significant Webuild S.P.A. infrastructure project, suggesting potential misstatement. The project manager, under pressure to meet budget targets, has proposed a solution to reclassify certain expenses to a different cost category without full supporting documentation, which they believe will resolve the discrepancy without impacting the overall project profitability. What is the most appropriate course of action for a Webuild S.P.A. employee who becomes aware of this situation? Option A. Ignore the discrepancy, as it is a matter for the project manager and the audit team to resolve. Option B. Advise the project manager to proceed with the reclassification, but to ensure it is documented thoroughly after the fact. Option C. Proceed with the project manager's proposed reclassification of expenses, assuming it is a common practice to manage budget reporting. Option D. Immediately report the discrepancy and the project manager's proposed solution to the internal compliance department and the external auditors. Correct answer is D. Immediately report the discrepancy and the project manager's proposed solution to the internal compliance department and the external auditors. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the conflict between immediate financial pressures and long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. Webuild S.P.A. faces a situation where a perceived shortcut could lead to short-term gains, but carries significant risks of regulatory noncompliance and reputational damage. The core of the challenge lies in balancing business objectives with the imperative to uphold integrity and adhere to established legal and ethical standards. Careful judgment is required to navigate this conflict without compromising the company's standing. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the discrepancy to the relevant internal compliance department and external auditors, as per standard corporate governance and auditing principles. This demonstrates transparency, accountability, and a commitment to rectifying errors promptly. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing financial reporting and corporate conduct, mandate accurate and timely disclosure of material information. By proactively engaging with compliance and audit teams, Webuild S.P.A. ensures that any identified issues are addressed through established channels, minimizing potential penalties and maintaining stakeholder trust. This aligns with the ethical principle of honesty and the legal requirement for due diligence. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal the discrepancy or to delay reporting it in the hope that it will not be discovered. This action directly violates principles of transparency and integrity and could constitute a breach of financial reporting regulations. Such a delay could also be interpreted as an attempt to mislead stakeholders, including investors and regulatory bodies, leading to severe legal consequences and reputational harm. Furthermore, attempting to rectify the issue internally without involving the proper oversight mechanisms bypasses crucial control procedures designed to prevent and detect fraud or errors, thereby undermining the company's internal control environment. Another incorrect approach would be to instruct the project team to adjust the figures to align with expectations without proper documentation or justification. This is a clear attempt to manipulate financial records, which is unethical and illegal. It bypasses the audit process and creates a false representation of the company's financial position. This action not only violates accounting standards, but also erodes the credibility of financial reporting and can lead to significant penalties for both the individuals involved and the company. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's code of conduct, relevant regulatory requirements, and established internal reporting procedures. When faced with a potential discrepancy or ethical concern, the first step should always be to gather all relevant facts. Subsequently, the individual should consult with their direct supervisor and the designated compliance or legal department. Escalation through the appropriate channels ensures that the issue is handled with the necessary expertise and adherence to established protocols. Prioritizing transparency, accuracy, and adherence to regulations, even when it presents short-term challenges, is paramount for maintaining professional integrity and the long-term health of the organization. Question 3. Process analysis reveals that Webuild S.P.A. is seeking to optimize its project execution workflows to enhance efficiency and reduce delivery times. Considering the company's operations in the infrastructure sector, which of the following approaches to process optimization would be most professionally sound and compliant with regulatory expectations for such projects? Option A. Implementing a streamlined vendor selection process that reduces the number of mandatory compliance checks to expedite contract awards. Option B. Developing a new project management software that automates task allocation and progress tracking, ensuring all data inputs and outputs align with the specific reporting requirements mandated by relevant infrastructure project laws and guidelines. Option C. Focusing on internal operational efficiencies and adopting lean methodologies without a specific review of how these changes interact with existing infrastructure project regulations. Option D. adopting procurement best practices from the retail industry to accelerate supply chain management for construction materials. The correct answer is A. Implementing a streamlined vendor selection process that reduces the number of mandatory compliance checks to expedite contract awards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Webuild SP.A. to balance the imperative of process optimization with adherence to stringent regulatory frameworks governing infrastructure projects. The pressure to improve efficiency and reduce costs must not compromise compliance, safety, or ethical conduct. Misjudging the regulatory landscape can lead to significant legal repercussions, project delays, reputational damage, and financial penalties. Therefore, a nuanced understanding of applicable regulations is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of Webuild SP.A.'s existing procurement processes against the specific regulatory framework governing public infrastructure projects in the relevant jurisdiction. This includes identifying any clauses or requirements within these regulations that mandate specific procedures for vendor selection, contract negotiation, or performance monitoring. The focus should be on identifying opportunities for optimization that are within the bounds of these regulations, such as streamlining documentation, improving communication protocols, or implementing digital tools for oversight without altering the fundamental compliance requirements. This approach ensures that efficiency gains do not inadvertently lead to non-compliance, thereby safeguarding the company from legal and ethical breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes speed and cost reduction by bypassing established regulatory checks and balances for vendor pre-qualification is ethically and regulatorily unsound. This would likely violate principles of fair competition and transparency, potentially leading to the selection of unqualified vendors and compromising project integrity. An approach that focuses solely on internal efficiency metrics without considering the external regulatory environment for infrastructure projects is also flawed. While internal improvements are valuable, they must be contextualized within the legal and compliance obligations that Webuild SP.A. must meet. Ignoring these external factors can lead to processes that are efficient internally but non-compliant externally. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or industry best practices from unrelated sectors without verifying their applicability and compliance with the specific regulatory framework for Webuild SP.A.'s projects is professionally negligent. Regulatory requirements for infrastructure projects are often highly specific and may not align with general business optimization strategies. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Webuild SP.A. should adopt a systematic decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the applicable regulatory framework. This involves consulting legal and compliance departments, reviewing relevant legislation and guidelines, and seeking expert advice when necessary. And considering process optimization, the primary filter should always be regulatory compliance. Any proposed optimization must be rigorously assessed for its impact on adherence to these regulations. If a proposed optimization appears to conflict with regulatory requirements, it should be rejected or modified until it demonstrably aligns with legal and ethical standards. The goal is to achieve efficiency through compliance, not at its expense. Question 4. Research into process optimization for Webuild SP.A.'s hiring assessment procedures has identified several potential improvements. Considering the absolute priority of adhering only to the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specified for the Webuild SP.A. hiring assessment test, which of the following approaches best aligns with these requirements? Option A. Introducing a standardized pre-employment assessment tool that has been validated for general use in the construction industry, assuming its compatibility with the Webuild SP.A. hiring assessment test's specific jurisdictional requirements. Option B. Implementing a new candidate screening software that utilizes AI-driven analysis, drawing upon general best practices in recruitment technology and data privacy regulations common across the European Union. Option C. Proposing a revised candidate feedback mechanism that incorporates elements from various international HR standards to enhance candidate experience, ensuring it strictly adheres to the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines provided for the Webuild SP.A. hiring assessment test. Option D. Developing a streamlined interview scheduling system that prioritizes speed and candidate convenience, referencing widely adopted project management methodologies for efficiency gains, without specific verification against the assessment's stipulated regulatory framework. The correct answer is B. Implementing a new candidate screening software that utilizes AI-driven analysis, drawing upon general best practices in recruitment technology and data privacy regulations common across the European Union. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for Webuild SPA employees tasked with optimizing internal processes. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for efficiency and cost reduction with the absolute imperative to adhere to the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines applicable to the Webuild SPA hiring assessment test. Misinterpreting or disregarding these jurisdictional requirements can lead to noncompliance, invalidating the assessment, and potentially having broader implications for the company's hiring practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed process optimization is not only effective, but also strictly within the defined legal and regulatory boundaries of the assessment. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the Webuild SPA hiring assessment test's specific regulatory framework. This means identifying and applying only those laws, regulations, and guidelines explicitly stated or implied for this assessment. The professional justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of strict compliance. Any deviation, even if seemingly beneficial for process optimization, would be considered a failure to adhere to the assessment's governing rules. This upholds the integrity of the hiring process and ensures that candidates are evaluated under the correct and stipulated conditions. An incorrect approach would be to introduce external regulatory frameworks or generic best practices that are not part of the Webuild SPA hiring assessment test's specified jurisdiction. For instance, referencing general EU data protection laws when the assessment is explicitly governed by a different, specific set of national or company-specific regulations would be a regulatory failure. Similarly, proposing process changes based on common industry standards without verifying their compatibility with the assessment's unique rules would be an ethical failure, as it undermines the fairness and validity of the assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of implementation over strict adherence to the assessment's procedural requirements, potentially leading to overlooking critical compliance steps. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear identification of the governing regulatory landscape for the specific task at hand, in this case, the Webuild SPA hiring assessment test. This involves actively seeking out and understanding the precise legal and guideline documents that apply. Any proposed process optimization should then be rigorously cross-referenced against these documents. If a proposed optimization conflicts with or is not explicitly permitted by the assessment's framework, it must be rejected or modified to ensure full compliance. The guiding principle should always be compliance first, then optimization. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate that certain operational workflows within Webuild SPA projects are experiencing inefficiencies. Considering the company's commitment to regulatory compliance, which of the following approaches to process optimization is most professionally sound and aligned with best practices? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of existing processes, analyze data to identify specific inefficiencies, develop proposed optimizations, and implement a formal risk assessment and approval process for all changes, ensuring alignment with relevant Italian and EU construction and corporate law. Option B. Implement immediate process changes based on the subjective observations of site managers to expedite project timelines, assuming that any minor deviations will be rectified later. Option C. Prioritize the adoption of the latest available software solutions for process automation, without a detailed assessment of their compatibility with current regulatory requirements or their impact on existing operational procedures. Option D. Focus solely on reducing labor costs through process streamlining, without conducting a comprehensive evaluation of the potential impact on regulatory adherence or the quality of project deliverables. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of existing processes, analyze data to identify specific inefficiencies, develop proposed optimizations, and implement a formal risk assessment and approval process for all changes, ensuring alignment with relevant Italian and EU construction and corporate law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for Webuild SPA in balancing the need for efficient project execution with the imperative to adhere to stringent regulatory requirements for process optimization. The core difficulty lies in identifying and implementing improvements that demonstrably enhance operational efficiency without compromising compliance, potentially leading to significant financial and reputational risks if not managed correctly. The pressure to deliver projects on time and within budget can create a temptation to bypass or superficially address regulatory mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies through data analysis and stakeholder consultation. This is followed by the development of proposed optimizations that are then rigorously assessed for their impact on regulatory compliance and project outcomes. Crucially, any proposed changes must be formally approved by relevant internal stakeholders, where applicable, external regulatory bodies before implementation. This methodical compliance-first strategy ensures that process improvements are sustainable, legally sound, and contribute positively to Webuild S.P.A.'s overall performance, aligning with the principles of good corporate governance and risk management expected under relevant Italian and EU construction and corporate law frameworks. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing process changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or the perceived urgency of project deadlines without a formal review and approval process is professionally unacceptable. This approach risks introducing noncompliance with regulations governing operational procedures, potentially leading to fines, project delays, or even contract termination. It bypasses the necessary due diligence and documentation required to demonstrate adherence to legal and contractual obligations. Adopting process optimizations that have not undergone a thorough risk assessment for their impact on regulatory compliance, even if they promise significant cost savings, is also professionally unsound. This failure to proactively identify and mitigate compliance risks can result in unforeseen legal challenges, reputational damage, and financial penalties. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to the principles of responsible business conduct and regulatory stewardship, focusing exclusively on technological solutions for process optimization, without considering their integration with existing regulatory frameworks and operational procedures, is another flawed approach. While technology can be a powerful tool, its implementation must be carefully managed to ensure it supports, rather than undermines, compliance with established laws and guidelines. This oversight can lead to operational disruptions and noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Webuild S.P.A. should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of regulatory requirements before initiating any process optimization. This involves 1. Thoroughly researching and understanding all applicable laws, regulations, and industry best practices relevant to the specific project and operational area. 2. Establishing clear internal protocols for process review, risk assessment, and change management that explicitly incorporate regulatory compliance checks at every stage. 3. Engaging relevant legal and compliance teams early in the optimization process to ensure proposed changes are legally sound. 4. Documenting all steps, analyses, and approvals meticulously to provide a clear audit trail. This structured approach ensures that efficiency gains are achieved responsibly and sustainably, safeguarding the company's legal standing and reputation. Question 6. Comparative studies suggest that process optimization can significantly enhance operational efficiency for large infrastructure firms like Webuild S.P.A. Considering the company's commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct, which of the following approaches best balances the drive for efficiency with these critical imperatives? Option A. Focusing exclusively on streamlining workflows to reduce project timeline, with minimal consideration for potential regulatory implications or the need for formal documentation of changes. Option B. Expediting the adoption of new technologies and workflows by bypassing standard internal approval processes to achieve immediate cost reductions and efficiency gains. Option C. Implementing a phased approach to process improvement, starting with pilot programs that undergo rigorous regulatory impact assessments and stakeholder consultations before full-scale deployment. Option D. Outsourcing process optimization to external consultants who are not required to disclose their methodologies or the regulatory compliance of their proposed solutions. The correct answer is C. Implementing a phased approach to process improvement, starting with pilot programs that undergo rigorous regulatory impact assessments and stakeholder consultations before full-scale deployment. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge in optimizing process efficiency within Webuild SP.A. While adhering to stringent regulatory frameworks, core difficulty lies in balancing the pursuit of innovation and cost reduction with the imperative to maintain compliance and ethical standards. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to ensure that process improvements do not inadvertently lead to breaches of regulatory requirements or compromise the integrity of operations. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and proposing solutions that are demonstrably compliant with all applicable regulations. This method ensures that any changes are not only effective in improving efficiency, but also legally sound and ethically responsible. Specifically, regulatory frameworks governing construction and public works often mandate transparency, fair competition, and robust risk management. Therefore, any process optimization must be evaluated against these principles, ensuring that improvements do not create undue advantages, obscure risks, or violate data privacy or environmental regulations. The emphasis on documentation provides an audit trail, crucial for demonstrating compliance during regulatory inspections or internal reviews. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid implementation without thorough regulatory vetting risks significant penalties and reputational damage. For instance, bypassing established procurement procedures in the name of speed could violate competition laws and Webuild SP.A.'s internal codes of conduct. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings by reducing quality control measures would directly contravene industry standards and potentially safety regulations, leading to compromised project outcomes and legal liabilities. Furthermore, adopting new technologies without assessing their compliance with data protection laws, e.g., GDPR if applicable to Webuild SP.A.'s operations, would expose the company to severe fines and legal action. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape relevant to Webuild SP.A.'s operations. This involves proactive engagement with compliance departments and legal counsel. When considering process changes, a risk-based assessment should be conducted, evaluating potential impacts on compliance, ethics, and operational integrity. Prioritizing solutions that offer a clear benefit while demonstrably meeting or exceeding regulatory requirements is paramount. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to ensure that optimized processes remain compliant and effective over time. Question 7. Risk assessment procedures indicate that Webuild SP.A. could significantly improve project delivery timelines and resource allocation. Considering the company's commitment to regulatory adherence, which of the following approaches to process optimization is most aligned with best professional practice and the company's operational context? Option A. Focusing optimization efforts solely on areas with the most visible operational bottlenecks, without a systematic evaluation of how these changes might impact less obvious but critical regulatory compliance aspects. Option B. Prioritizing the adoption of the fastest and cheapest process improvements identified by operational teams, assuming that efficiency gains will inherently satisfy regulatory requirements. Option C. Implementing process changes based on industry best practices identified through external benchmarking, without a detailed review of their specific applicability to Webuild SP.A.'s regulatory environment. Option D. Conducting a thorough internal review of current processes to identify inefficiencies, developing data-driven proposals for optimization, and ensuring all proposed changes are rigorously assessed for compliance with all applicable regulations before implementation, with documented stakeholder consultation. The correct answer is C. Implementing process changes based on industry best practices identified through external benchmarking, without a detailed review of their specific applicability to Webuild SP.A.'s regulatory environment. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for Webuild SP.A. in balancing the need for efficient project execution with the imperative to adhere to stringent regulatory requirements for process optimization. The core difficulty lies in identifying and implementing improvements that demonstrably enhance operational efficiency without compromising compliance, potentially leading to reputational damage or legal repercussions if not handled correctly. The pressure to deliver projects on time and within budget can create a temptation to bypass or superficially address regulatory mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of existing processes, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and then proposing and implementing changes that are demonstrably aligned with and supportive of the regulatory framework governing Webuild S.P.A.'s operations. This includes a thorough understanding of the specific regulations applicable to construction and infrastructure projects within the relevant jurisdiction, ensuring that any optimization efforts do not introduce new risks or violate existing compliance obligations. The emphasis on documented evidence and stakeholder consultation ensures transparency and accountability, aligning with principles of good corporate governance and regulatory adherence. This approach prioritizes a proactive and integrated strategy where process improvement is viewed as a tool for enhanced compliance and risk mitigation, rather than a separate objective. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without a comprehensive assessment of regulatory impact risks introducing noncompliance. This could lead to shortcuts that violate safety standards, environmental regulations, or contractual obligations, resulting in fines, project delays, or legal challenges. An approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thoroughness and validation is also problematic. Rushing through process changes without adequate testing or stakeholder buy-in can lead to unforeseen issues, errors, and a failure to achieve the intended optimization, potentially creating new inefficiencies or compliance gaps. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or informal feedback for process changes, without rigorous data collection and analysis, is insufficient. This lacks the objective basis required for effective process optimization and can lead to decisions that are not data-driven, potentially overlooking critical regulatory considerations or failing to address the root causes of inefficiency. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Webuild S.P.A. should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates regulatory compliance into the very fabric of process optimization. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the applicable regulatory landscape for all project phases. 2. Conducting a comprehensive assessment of current processes, identifying areas for improvement with a specific focus on potential regulatory implications. 3. Developing optimization proposals that are not only efficient but also demonstrably compliant, supported by data and risk assessments. 4. Engaging relevant stakeholders, including compliance officers and legal counsel, throughout the process. 5. Implementing changes in a controlled manner, with clear metrics for success and ongoing monitoring for compliance and effectiveness. Question 8. Regulatory review indicates that Webuild S.P.A. has identified a significant previously undisclosed environmental remediation cost associated with a past project. This cost, while material, is not yet fully quantified but is expected to impact future profitability. Which of the following approaches best addresses the regulatory and ethical considerations for Webuild S.P.A. in managing this information? Option A. Inform only key institutional investors about the potential environmental remediation costs to allow them to adjust their positions proactively. Option B. Delay any public disclosure of the environmental remediation cost until the exact final cost is determined, regardless of how long that may take. Option C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment involving relevant internal departments to estimate the cost, evaluate its materiality, and determine the appropriate disclosure strategy in accordance with applicable regulations before any public announcement. Option D. Immediately disclose the existence of the environmental remediation cost to the market without a precise quantification, relying on market participants to interpret its significance. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment involving relevant internal departments to estimate the cost, evaluate its materiality, and determine the appropriate disclosure strategy in accordance with applicable regulations before any public announcement. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Webuild S.P.A., as a publicly listed entity, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight concerning its financial reporting and disclosures. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate information dissemination with the potential for market manipulation or insider trading. A robust impact assessment is crucial to ensure that any new information is communicated in a manner that is fair to all market participants and complies with relevant regulations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the potential effects of the new information on Webuild S.P.A.'s share price, investor confidence, and broader market perception. This assessment must be conducted by appropriate internal stakeholders, such as investor relations and legal departments, in consultation with senior management. The regulatory justification stems from principles of market integrity and fair disclosure, aiming to prevent selective disclosure and ensure that all investors have access to material information simultaneously. This aligns with the spirit of regulations designed to maintain an orderly and transparent market. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disclose the information without a proper assessment. This could lead to a market reaction that is not fully understood or managed, potentially creating volatility or giving the impression of preferential treatment to certain market participants. Another incorrect approach would be to delay disclosure indefinitely, which could violate disclosure obligations if the information is deemed material and required to be made public. Furthermore, relying solely on external advisors without internal validation and understanding of the information's nuances would be a failure to exercise due diligence and internal control. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with identifying the nature and materiality of the information. This should be followed by an assessment of its potential impact on the company and the market. Based on this assessment, a decision should be made regarding the appropriate timing and method of disclosure, always prioritizing compliance with regulatory requirements and ethical standards of fair disclosure. Question 9. Consider a scenario where a critical infrastructure project for Webuild S.P.A. is facing significant delays due to unforeseen geological conditions. The project manager is under immense pressure from stakeholders to accelerate the timeline. To expedite progress, the project manager proposes to proceed with certain construction phases that involve potential disturbance to a nearby sensitive wetland ecosystem, arguing that a full environmental impact assessment for these specific phases can be completed retrospectively once initial construction is underway. What is the most appropriate approach for Webuild S.P.A. employees to take in this situation, strictly adhering to regulatory frameworks and ethical guidelines? Option A. Commence construction in the wetland area as proposed by the project manager, with the understanding that a full environmental impact assessment will be conducted and submitted to the relevant authorities within a specified timeframe after construction begins. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment for all proposed construction phases, including the wetland disturbance, before any further work commences, and engage with environmental regulators to discuss potential mitigation strategies and any necessary permit adjustments. Option C. Halt all construction activities until a complete and detailed environmental impact assessment for the entire project, including all potential geological and ecological impacts, is finalized and approved by all relevant regulatory bodies. Option D. Proceed with the initial construction phases that do not directly impact the wetland, while simultaneously initiating a preliminary assessment of the wetland's environmental significance to inform future decisions. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment for all proposed construction phases, including the wetland disturbance, before any further work commences, and engage with environmental regulators to discuss potential mitigation strategies and any necessary permit adjustments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Webuild S.P.A. employees due to the inherent conflict between achieving project deadlines and adhering to stringent environmental impact assessment (IA) regulations. The pressure to deliver on time can create an incentive to overlook or downplay potential environmental risks, leading to non-compliance and significant reputational and legal consequences. Careful judgment is required to balance operational efficiency with regulatory obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with the EIA process, ensuring all potential environmental impacts are thoroughly identified, assessed, and mitigated in accordance with applicable Webuild S.P.A. internal guidelines and relevant national environmental protection laws. This includes conducting comprehensive baseline studies, consulting with environmental experts, and developing robust mitigation and monitoring plans. This approach is correct because it prioritizes regulatory compliance and responsible environmental stewardship, which are fundamental ethical and legal obligations for any construction company operating within regulated jurisdictions. Adherence to EIA requirements prevents environmental damage, avoids penalties, and upholds the company's commitment to sustainability. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that prioritizes immediate project commencement without a complete EIA is incorrect because it directly violates environmental protection laws and internal Webuild S.P.A. policies that mandate such assessments before significant ground disturbance or construction activities begin. This failure to conduct a proper EIA exposes the company to legal sanctions, fines, and potential project suspension. An approach that involves conducting a superficial EIA, focusing only on easily identifiable impacts while ignoring potential long-term or indirect consequences, is also incorrect. This constitutes a breach of regulatory requirements for a comprehensive assessment and demonstrates a lack of due diligence. Such an approach risks unforeseen environmental damage, public outcry, and legal challenges. An approach that attempts to circumvent or manipulate the EIA process by selectively presenting data or omitting unfavorable findings is fundamentally unethical and illegal. This undermines the integrity of the regulatory framework designed to protect the environment and public health. It can lead to severe penalties, including criminal charges, and irreparable damage to Webuild S.P.A.'s reputation. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Webuild S.P.A. should adopt a decision-making framework that embeds regulatory compliance and ethical considerations at the forefront of project planning and execution. This involves understanding the specific environmental laws and Webuild S.P.A. policies applicable to each project's jurisdiction, seeking expert advice when necessary, and fostering a culture where environmental responsibility is valued as highly as project delivery. When faced with pressure to expedite, professionals must clearly articulate the risks of non-compliance and advocate for adherence to established procedures. Question 10. Benchmark analysis indicates that Webuild S.P.A. is facing pressure to meet projected earnings targets for the upcoming reporting period. Management is considering several accounting adjustments to improve reported profitability. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with regulatory frameworks and ethical reporting standards? Option A. Consult with external stakeholders to gauge their expectations regarding earnings, and then align accounting adjustments to meet those perceived expectations. Option B. Make subjective accounting adjustments based on management's optimistic projections for future performance, without rigorous substantiation or consideration of potential negative outcomes. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of all proposed accounting adjustments, evaluating their effect on financial statements, disclosures, and compliance with applicable accounting standards and regulations. Option D. Implement accounting adjustments that are perceived to be most effective in achieving the target earnings, prioritizing short-term financial performance over detailed impact analysis. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of all proposed accounting adjustments, evaluating their effect on financial statements, disclosures, and compliance with applicable accounting standards and regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Webuild S.P.A., as a publicly listed entity, operates within a stringent regulatory environment that mandates transparency and accurate financial reporting. The pressure to meet market expectations and investor demands can create a conflict between short-term performance and long-term sustainable reporting. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any adjustments made to financial statements are compliant with accounting standards and do not mislead stakeholders. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that meticulously evaluates the consequences of proposed accounting adjustments on all relevant financial metrics and disclosures. This approach is correct because it aligns with the fundamental principles of accounting integrity and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of prudence, materiality, and full disclosure, which are cornerstones of financial reporting frameworks. By systematically analyzing the impact, Webuild S.P.A. ensures that any changes are justifiable, accurately reflect the company's financial position, and comply with relevant accounting standards and disclosure requirements, thereby maintaining investor confidence and avoiding regulatory sanctions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on achieving a specific earnings target without a comprehensive impact assessment is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from prioritizing short-term financial goals over regulatory and ethical obligations. Such an approach risks misrepresenting the company's financial health, potentially violating accounting standards by employing aggressive or misleading accounting practices. This can lead to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of investor trust. Another incorrect approach that involves making subjective adjustments based on management's optimistic outlook, without rigorous substantiation or consideration of potential downside risks, is also professionally unsound. This deviates from the principle of objectivity in financial reporting. It can result in financial statements that are not a true and fair view of the company's performance, potentially misleading stakeholders, and exposing the company to legal and regulatory scrutiny. A professional reasoning framework for such situations should begin with a clear understanding of the applicable accounting standards and regulatory requirements. Professionals must then critically evaluate any proposed accounting adjustments, considering their impact on financial statements, disclosures, and stakeholder perceptions. This involves seeking independent verification, consulting with internal and external auditors, and documenting the rationale and evidence supporting any accounting decisions. The ultimate goal is to ensure that financial reporting is accurate, transparent, and compliant, fostering a culture of ethical conduct and long-term sustainability for Webuild S.P.A. Question 11. The investigation demonstrates that Webuild S.P.A. is considering accelerating the construction phase of a new infrastructure project, with preliminary environmental surveys indicating potential impacts on a sensitive local ecosystem. What is the most appropriate approach for Webuild S.P.A. to adopt in this situation, strictly adhering to regulatory frameworks and ethical considerations for responsible project development? Option A. Immediately commence construction to meet project deadlines, deferring a comprehensive environmental impact assessment until after the initial construction phase. Option B. Initiate a full and detailed environmental impact assessment, engaging relevant experts and stakeholders to inform the decision-making process for the construction phase. Option C. Proceed with construction based on the preliminary findings, assuming any significant environmental issues will be addressed reactively as they arise. Option D. Conduct a limited, expedited environmental review that focuses only on the most obvious potential impacts to avoid significant project delays. The correct answer is A. Immediately commence construction to meet project deadlines, deferring a comprehensive environmental impact assessment until after the initial construction phase. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for timely project execution and the imperative to conduct thorough due diligence, especially when dealing with potential environmental impacts. Webuild S.P.A., as a major infrastructure developer, operates within a stringent regulatory environment that mandates comprehensive impact assessments before significant project phases commence. The challenge lies in balancing the pressures of project timelines with the legal and ethical obligations to identify, assess, and mitigate potential environmental harm. A hasty decision without proper assessment risks not only regulatory noncompliance, but also significant reputational damage and long-term environmental consequences. The correct approach involves prioritizing a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, IA, before committing to the construction phase. This aligns with the precautionary principle often embedded in environmental regulations, which requires proactive measures to prevent environmental damage even in the absence of absolute scientific certainty. Conducting a thorough EIA allows Webuild S.P.A. to identify potential risks to biodiversity, water resources, air quality, and local communities. It also provides a basis for developing effective mitigation strategies, obtaining necessary permits, and ensuring compliance with all applicable environmental laws and regulations. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible development and stakeholder engagement. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with construction based on preliminary findings or to defer the full EIA until after construction has begun. This would represent a failure to adhere to the spirit and letter of environmental protection laws, which typically require such assessments to inform decision-making prior to irreversible actions. It could lead to significant fines, project delays due to unforeseen environmental issues requiring remediation, and legal challenges from environmental groups or affected communities. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial assessment that downplays potential negative impacts to expedite the project. This is ethically unsound and legally risky, as regulatory bodies will scrutinize the thoroughness and objectivity of the EIA. Such an approach undermines the credibility of Webuild S.p.A. and its commitment to sustainable practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that systematically integrates regulatory requirements, ethical considerations, and project objectives. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant legal and regulatory obligations, particularly those pertaining to environmental impact assessments. 2. Understanding the potential environmental and social consequences of the project. 3. Evaluating different approaches to impact assessment, prioritizing thoroughness and scientific rigor. 4. Consulting with relevant stakeholders, including environmental experts and regulatory bodies. 5. Making decisions that demonstrably prioritize compliance, sustainability, and long-term project viability over short-term expediency. Question 12. The analysis reveals that a key client of Webuild S.p.A. has invited a senior project manager to an exclusive, all-expenses-paid weekend retreat at a luxury resort. This retreat is being offered as a thank you for the successful completion of a significant project phase. The project manager is aware that further substantial contracts are anticipated from this client in the near future. Considering Webuild S.p.A.'s commitment to ethical business practices and compliance with anti-bribery regulations, what is the most appropriate course of action for the project manager? Option A. Accept the invitation, viewing it as a valuable opportunity to strengthen client relationships and foster goodwill for future business. Option B. Accept the invitation and reciprocate with a similarly valuable gift to the client after the retreat. Option C. Accept the invitation but ensure to document it thoroughly and disclose it to senior management immediately. Option D. Politely decline the invitation, citing company policy on gifts and hospitality, and suggest an alternative, more modest form of appreciation if appropriate. The correct answer is D. Politely decline the invitation, citing company policy on gifts and hospitality, and suggest an alternative, more modest form of appreciation if appropriate. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Webuild S.p.A. employees due to the inherent conflict between maintaining client relationships and adhering to strict ethical guidelines regarding gifts and hospitality. The challenge lies in navigating the gray areas where seemingly innocuous gestures could be misconstrued or, worse, constitute a breach of anti-bribery and corruption regulations. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate business courtesies and inducements that could compromise integrity. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict application of Webuild S.p.A.'s internal code of conduct and relevant anti-bribery laws, which likely prohibit offering or accepting gifts, hospitality, or other benefits that could influence business decisions or create a conflict of interest. This approach prioritizes transparency, ethical conduct, and compliance, ensuring that all interactions are above reproach and do not create any perception of impropriety. It aligns with the principle of acting with integrity and avoiding situations that could lead to corruption or undue influence. An incorrect approach of accepting the offer without considering its potential implications is professionally unacceptable because it disregards the company's ethical framework and potentially violates anti-bribery legislation. This could lead to severe reputational damage for Webuild S.p.A., legal penalties, and disciplinary action against the employee. Another incorrect approach of accepting the offer but downplaying its significance or attempting to rationalize it as a minor gesture fails to acknowledge the potential for even small benefits to create an obligation or the appearance of one. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold the high ethical standards expected of employees. Finally, an incorrect approach of accepting the offer and immediately reciprocating with a gift of similar or greater value, without proper authorization or adherence to policy, also risks violating regulations and creating a cycle of potentially inappropriate exchanges. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of company policies and applicable laws. When faced with a situation involving potential gifts or hospitality, the first step is to assess whether the offer aligns with these guidelines. If there is any doubt, or if the offer exceeds nominal value or frequency, the professional should err on the side of caution and decline the offer or seek guidance from their compliance department. Transparency and documentation are crucial. Any permissible hospitality should be recorded according to company procedures. The guiding principle should always be to protect the integrity of Webuild S.P.A. and its employees, ensuring that all business dealings are conducted ethically and without compromise. Question 13. The efficiency study reveals that implementing a new waste management system at a Webuild S.P.A. construction site could significantly reduce operational costs. However, preliminary internal reviews suggest this new system might also lead to a marginal increase in certain types of airborne particulate matter, though the exact long-term impact and compliance with specific environmental thresholds are not yet fully quantified. The project manager is under pressure to present a swift plan for implementation. What is the most professionally responsible course of action for the Webuild S.P.A. project manager in this situation? Option A. Halt the implementation of the new waste management system and revert to the old system, prioritizing absolute certainty of no environmental impact over potential cost efficiencies. Option B. Proceed with the implementation of the new waste management system immediately to realize cost savings, assuming the potential environmental impact is minor and will be addressed if it becomes a significant issue later. Option C. Commission an independent, comprehensive environmental impact assessment to fully quantify the potential airborne, particulate matter increase and its compliance with all relevant environmental regulations before making a decision on implementation. Option D. Implement the new waste management system, but only communicate the cost-saving benefits to stakeholders, deferring any discussion of potential environmental concerns until they are definitively proven to be problematic. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the implementation of the new waste management system immediately to realize cost savings, assuming the potential environmental impact is minor and will be addressed if it becomes a significant issue later. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Webuild S.P.A. employees due to the inherent conflict between achieving operational efficiency and adhering to strict regulatory compliance, particularly concerning environmental impact and public disclosure. The need to balance cost-saving measures with legal obligations and ethical considerations requires careful judgment. The correct approach involves prioritizing a thorough, independent environmental impact assessment before implementing any significant operational changes. This aligns with the principles of responsible corporate conduct and regulatory frameworks that mandate environmental protection and transparency. Specifically, it upholds the spirit of regulations that require proactive identification and mitigation of environmental risks, ensuring that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of ecological integrity or public trust. This approach demonstrates a commitment to sustainable business practices and adherence to legal mandates for environmental stewardship. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without a comprehensive environmental review fails to meet regulatory obligations. Such an approach risks violating environmental protection laws, which often require pre-implementation assessments and mitigation plans for projects that could impact the environment. Furthermore, it disregards the ethical imperative to operate sustainably and transparently, potentially leading to reputational damage and legal penalties. Another incorrect approach that involves selectively disclosing only positive environmental findings while omitting potential negative impacts is a clear breach of transparency and disclosure regulations. This misrepresents the true environmental footprint of the proposed changes and undermines public confidence. Ethical standards and regulatory requirements for disclosure demand a complete and accurate representation of all relevant information, especially concerning environmental performance. The professional reasoning framework for navigating such situations should involve a multi-stakeholder perspective, considering legal, ethical, operational, and environmental dimensions. Professionals should first identify all relevant regulatory requirements and ethical guidelines. Then they should gather comprehensive data, including potential environmental impacts, and consult with relevant experts. Decision-making should be guided by a commitment to compliance, transparency, and sustainability, ensuring that any proposed efficiency measures are both legally sound and ethically responsible. Question 14. To address the challenge of communicating Webuild S.P.A.'s commitment to environmental sustainability to stakeholders, which of the following communication strategies would be most professionally sound and compliant with regulatory expectations for accurate corporate disclosure? Option A. Announce a new, broad sustainability pledge for Webuild S.P.A. that outlines aspirational goals for the next decade, without detailing specific methodologies, timelines, or measurable outcomes for achieving these goals. Option B. Focus exclusively on Webuild S.P.A.'s most impactful environmental initiatives and present them as definitive solutions to all environmental concerns, using broad, positive language without specific data to illustrate progress. Option C. Emphasize Webuild S.P.A.'s ambitious sustainability targets and highlight successful pilot projects, while acknowledging that some environmental challenges are ongoing and require continuous effort, supported by publicly available data on key performance indicators. Option D. Publicly showcase Webuild S.P.A.'s investments in green technologies, framing them as evidence of complete environmental neutrality, and avoid mentioning any operational impacts that may not align with this narrative. The correct answer is C. Emphasize Webuild S.P.A.'s ambitious sustainability targets and highlight successful pilot projects, while acknowledging that some environmental challenges are ongoing and require continuous effort, supported by publicly available data on key performance indicators. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public perception and the ethical obligation to provide accurate and transparent information, especially when dealing with sensitive environmental matters. Webuild S.P.A., as a publicly listed entity, is subject to regulations that mandate truthful disclosure and prohibit misleading statements to investors and the public. The challenge lies in navigating the fine line between promoting the company's sustainability efforts and avoiding any misrepresentation of its environmental performance or the scope of its initiatives. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all communications are factually sound, substantiated, and do not create an unwarranted impression of environmental stewardship that is not fully supported by evidence. The correct approach involves a balanced and transparent communication strategy. This means acknowledging both achievements and ongoing challenges in environmental performance, providing verifiable data to support claims, and clearly delineating the scope and impact of sustainability projects. This approach aligns with regulatory frameworks that require accurate financial and non-financial reporting, preventing market manipulation and protecting stakeholders from misleading information. Ethically, it upholds the principle of honesty and integrity in corporate communications. An incorrect approach would be to selectively highlight positive environmental aspects, while downplaying or omitting negative impacts or areas requiring significant improvement. This could involve using vague or aspirational language that lacks concrete evidence or measurable outcomes, thereby creating a misleading impression of environmental leadership. Such an approach risks violating regulations concerning fair disclosure and could lead to accusations of greenwashing, damaging the company's reputation and potentially incurring regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to make unsubstantiated claims about future environmental benefits without a clear, actionable plan or realistic timeline, which also misleads stakeholders about the company's actual commitment and progress. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, transparency, and compliance. This involves conducting thorough due diligence on all environmental claims, ensuring that data is robust and verifiable, and seeking expert review of communications materials. The framework should also include a risk assessment to identify potential misinterpretations or misleading implications of the messaging. Ultimately, the decision should be guided by the principle of providing stakeholders with a true and fair view of the company's environmental performance and commitments, adhering strictly to all applicable regulatory requirements and ethical standards. Question 15. The review process indicates that a Webuild S.P.A. project manager, responsible for overseeing a significant infrastructure contract with a public entity, is considering offering a high-value, branded technical equipment package to the client's lead engineer as a token of appreciation for their collaborative efforts. The project manager believes this gesture, while not directly tied to any specific contract award or decision, will foster goodwill and strengthen the ongoing working relationship. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Webuild S.P.A. project manager in this situation, considering the company's commitment to ethical conduct and compliance with anti-bribery regulations? Option A. Seek prior written approval from Webuild S.P.A.'s compliance department for the offer of the technical equipment package, providing full details of its value and intended purpose. Option B. Offer a less expensive, generic corporate gift, such as branded stationery, to avoid any potential perception of impropriety. Option C. Proceed with offering the technical equipment package, as it is intended as a gesture of goodwill and not a direct inducement for any specific contract decision. Option D. Decline the offer of the technical equipment package and instead send a formal thank you letter acknowledging the client's collaboration. The correct answer is C. Proceed with offering the technical equipment package, as it is intended as a gesture of goodwill and not a direct inducement for any specific contract decision. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Webuild S.P.A. employees due to the inherent conflict between maintaining client relationships and adhering to strict ethical guidelines regarding gifts and hospitality. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for even seemingly minor gestures to be misconstrued as attempts to influence business decisions, thereby compromising the integrity of Webuild's operations and its reputation. Navigating this requires a nuanced understanding of the company's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks, which are designed to prevent corruption and ensure fair competition. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to Webuild S.P.A.'s Code of Conduct and any applicable anti-bribery and corruption laws. This approach prioritizes transparency and ethical conduct by ensuring that any gifts or hospitality offered or received are within predefined, reasonable limits, are infrequent, and are clearly documented. The justification for this approach lies in its alignment with the principles of integrity, fairness, and compliance, which are fundamental to Webuild's operational ethos and its commitment to lawful business practices. Such a stance protects the company from legal repercussions, reputational damage, and the erosion of trust with its stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a small, infrequent gift of nominal value is inconsequential and does not require formal approval or documentation. This fails to recognize that the cumulative effect of such action, or the perception of impropriety, can still lead to ethical breaches. It disregards the principle of zero tolerance, often embedded in corporate compliance programs and regulatory expectations, which aims to prevent even the appearance of undue influence. Another incorrect approach would be to offer a gift or hospitality that, while not explicitly prohibited by law, exceeds the reasonable limits set by Webuild's internal policies, or could be perceived as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage. This demonstrates a lack of diligence in understanding the company's specific guidelines and the spirit of the regulations. It risks creating a situation where Webuild could be accused of bribery or unethical business practices, even if no explicit quid pro quo was intended. A further incorrect approach would be to accept a gift from a client that is lavish or could reasonably be interpreted as an inducement, without seeking prior approval or declining it appropriately. This shows a disregard for the potential for conflicts of interest and the importance of maintaining an arm's-length relationship with clients. It exposes both the individual employee and Webuild to significant ethical and legal risks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive assessment of any proposed or received gift or hospitality against Webuild's Code of Conduct and relevant anti-bribery and corruption policies. If there is any doubt about the appropriateness or compliance of the gesture, the employee should err on the side of caution and seek guidance from their compliance department or legal counsel before proceeding. This systematic approach ensures that all actions are aligned with ethical standards and regulatory requirements, thereby safeguarding the reputation and integrity of Webuild S.P.A. Question 16. What factors determine the appropriate level of environmental impact assessment and mitigation required for Webuild S.P.A. infrastructure projects, considering the potential for project delays and the company's commitment to sustainable development? Option A. The availability of alternative construction methods that might reduce environmental impact, even if they are not mandated by current regulations. Option B. Projected cost savings from expedited construction timelines and the perceived likelihood of regulatory enforcement actions. Option C. The opinions of local community leaders regarding the project's environmental footprint, irrespective of formal regulatory requirements. Option D. The specific environmental regulations applicable to the project location, the nature and scale of potential environmental impacts identified, and the company's internal sustainability policies. The correct answer is D. The specific environmental regulations applicable to the project location, the nature and scale of potential environmental impacts identified, and the company's internal sustainability policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Webuild SPA employees due to the inherent conflict between achieving project deadlines and adhering to stringent environmental regulations. The pressure to complete infrastructure projects on time, often a key performance indicator, can create an environment where shortcuts or overlooking environmental compliance might seem expedient. However, the regulatory framework governing such projects, particularly in the context of a company like Webuild operating internationally, mandates a strict adherence to environmental protection laws. The professional challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with legal and ethical responsibilities, requiring careful judgment to avoid actions that could lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and environmental harm. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential environmental impacts during the planning and execution phases of Webuild SPA projects and implementing mitigation measures in strict accordance with applicable environmental laws and regulations. This includes conducting thorough environmental impact assessments, obtaining necessary permits, and continuously monitoring compliance throughout the project lifecycle. This approach is justified by the overarching legal and ethical obligation to protect the environment, as enshrined in national and international environmental legislation. Failure to do so can result in severe consequences, including fines, project suspension, and criminal liability for the company and its personnel. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of execution over environmental due diligence. This might manifest as delaying or omitting necessary environmental impact studies, proceeding with construction activities without securing required permits, or disregarding identified environmental risks in the hope that they will not materialize or will be addressed later. Such actions represent a direct violation of environmental laws and regulations, which typically require preemptive assessment and mitigation of environmental harm. Ethically, this approach demonstrates a disregard for corporate social responsibility and the well-being of affected communities and ecosystems. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the assurances of subcontractors regarding their environmental compliance without independent verification. While Webuild SPA may delegate certain tasks, the ultimate responsibility for compliance with environmental regulations often rests with the main contractor. A failure to adequately oversee and verify subcontractor adherence to environmental standards exposes Webuild SPA to significant legal and reputational risks, as any noncompliance by a subcontractor can be attributed to the principal company. This approach neglects the duty of care and due diligence expected of a major construction firm. A further incorrect approach involves interpreting environmental regulations in the narrowest possible way to minimize compliance efforts, or to assume that if a specific environmental impact is not explicitly prohibited, it is permissible. Environmental laws are often designed to be precautionary and to promote the best available techniques for environmental protection. A minimalist interpretation can lead to unforeseen environmental damage and legal challenges, as regulatory bodies typically expect companies to act in good faith and to strive for a high standard of environmental performance, not merely to avoid explicit prohibitions. The professional reasoning process for Webuild SPA employees in such situations should involve a hierarchical assessment of priorities. First, ensuring full compliance with all applicable environmental laws and regulations. Second, implementing best practices for environmental management to minimize impact. And third, achieving project objectives efficiently and effectively within these constraints. When faced with a conflict, employees should escalate concerns to their superiors and seek guidance from legal and environmental compliance departments to ensure that decisions are legally sound and ethically responsible. Question 17. System analysis indicates that Webuild SPA has identified a potential delay in a critical infrastructure project due to unforeseen geological challenges. While the project team believes they can mitigate the impact with minor adjustments, the delay, if it materializes, could exceed the threshold for mandatory disclosure under the relevant regulatory framework governing public works contracts. The project manager is concerned that immediate disclosure might negatively affect ongoing negotiations for future projects with the same client. What is the most appropriate course of action for Webuild SPA to take in this situation? Option A. Focus on resolving the issue internally and only report if the delay becomes unavoidable and significantly impacts project milestones to minimize disruption to future business prospects. Option B. Inform the client of the potential delay verbally to gauge their reaction, but refrain from formal reporting until the situation is clearer. Option C. Proactively report the potential delay and the mitigation strategies to the relevant regulatory bodies and the client, emphasizing the proactive steps being taken to manage the situation. Option D. Delay reporting the potential delay until the mitigation strategies have been fully implemented and the impact is definitively known to avoid premature negative perceptions. The correct answer is C. Proactively report the potential delay and the mitigation strategies to the relevant regulatory bodies and the client, emphasizing the proactive steps being taken to manage the situation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Webuild SP.A employees due to the inherent conflict between maintaining client relationships and adhering to strict regulatory disclosure requirements. The need for transparency and accurate reporting is paramount in the construction and infrastructure sector, especially when dealing with public entities or projects funded by international financial institutions, which often have stringent compliance frameworks. Failure to disclose material information, even if seemingly minor or potentially embarrassing, can lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of future business opportunities. Careful judgment is required to identify what constitutes material information and to ensure timely and accurate reporting without compromising legitimate business interests, but always prioritizing regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy that prioritizes regulatory disclosure. This means identifying any potential issues that could impact project timelines, costs, or quality, and immediately reporting them to the relevant regulatory bodies and stakeholders, as per the established contractual and legal obligations. This approach aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct, ensuring that Webuild SP.A operates with integrity and accountability. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit and letter of regulations that mandate disclosure of significant events or conditions that could affect the company's financial standing, operational capacity, or compliance status. This transparency builds trust with regulators and stakeholders, mitigating potential risks and demonstrating a commitment to responsible business practices. An incorrect approach would be to delay or omit disclosure of the identified issue, hoping it resolves itself or can be managed internally without external notification. This is a direct violation of regulatory frameworks that require prompt reporting of material information. Such an omission can be interpreted as an attempt to mislead or conceal, leading to severe sanctions. Another incorrect approach would be to provide incomplete or misleading information to regulators. This not only breaches disclosure obligations, but also undermines the integrity of the reporting process and can result in accusations of fraud or misrepresentation. A third incorrect approach might be to only disclose the issue after significant pressure or discovery by external parties. This reactive stance demonstrates a lack of commitment to proactive compliance and can lead to harsher penalties than if the issue had been voluntarily disclosed. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable regulatory requirements and contractual obligations. When an issue arises, the first step is to assess its materiality and potential impact. This assessment should be guided by established disclosure thresholds and the potential consequences of non-disclosure. If the issue is deemed material, the immediate next step is to consult with legal and compliance departments to ensure the disclosure is accurate, complete, and timely, and that it adheres to all procedural requirements. This proactive and compliant approach is crucial for maintaining the company's reputation and avoiding regulatory repercussions. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates that Webuild SP.A is considering a significant acquisition of a key supplier for a major ongoing infrastructure project. This supplier has recently been awarded a substantial contract by a public entity where a senior executive of Webuild SP.A previously held a significant leadership position. This prior role involved oversight of procurement processes for similar infrastructure projects. What is the most appropriate course of action for Webuild SP.A to ensure compliance with ethical standards and regulatory requirements? Option A. Immediately proceed with the acquisition, as the strategic benefits to Webuild SP.A are substantial and the prior role of the executive is no longer directly relevant to the current company. Option B. Delay the disclosure of the potential conflict of interest until after the acquisition is fully completed and integrated into Webuild S.P.A.'s operations. Option C. Conduct a thorough internal assessment of the potential conflict of interest. Formally disclose the situation to the relevant regulatory authorities and the company's board of directors, and seek independent legal counsel before proceeding with any acquisition steps. Option D. Proceed with the acquisition, but ensure that the executive in question is recused from all discussions and decision-making processes related to the supplier and the acquisition. The correct answer is A. Immediately proceed with the acquisition, as the strategic benefits to Webuild S.P.A. are substantial and the prior role of the executive is no longer directly relevant to the current company. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Webuild S.P.A. to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure fair treatment of all stakeholders, particularly in the context of a significant infrastructure project. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the company's strategic interests with its ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to uphold transparency, prevent undue influence, and maintain market integrity. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure process, coupled with a robust internal review mechanism. This approach aligns with principles of good corporate governance and regulatory expectations for companies operating in regulated sectors. Specifically, it demonstrates a commitment to identifying and mitigating potential conflicts of interest, ensuring that decisions are made in the best interest of the company and its shareholders, and adhering to any applicable disclosure requirements under relevant financial market regulations. This upholds the principle of fairness and prevents any perception of insider advantage or preferential treatment. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the acquisition without disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the relevant regulatory bodies and internal governance committees would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This omission could lead to accusations of market manipulation, breaches of fiduciary duty, and a lack of transparency, potentially resulting in severe penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which is to delay the disclosure until after the acquisition is finalized, also constitutes a regulatory and ethical failure. This delay undermines the principle of timely disclosure and can be interpreted as an attempt to circumvent scrutiny, thereby eroding trust and potentially violating regulations that mandate prompt reporting of material information. A further incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on informal internal discussions without formal documentation or review by an independent committee, fails to establish a clear audit trail and may not adequately address the complexities of the conflict. This informal process lacks the rigor required to demonstrate due diligence and compliance, leaving the company vulnerable to regulatory challenges and internal control weaknesses. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of potential conflicts of interest. This includes identifying all parties involved, understanding the nature of the relationship and potential benefits, assessing the materiality of the conflict, and consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations. A crucial step is to seek advice from legal and compliance departments, and to ensure that any potential conflicts are formally disclosed and managed through established governance procedures, prioritizing transparency and adherence to regulatory frameworks. Question 19. Governance review demonstrates that a key infrastructure project undertaken by Webuild S.P.A. is facing allegations of significant environmental noncompliance. These allegations, if proven, could lead to substantial fines and project suspension. Webuild S.P.A. must decide on the most appropriate course of action to address these concerns while safeguarding its commercial interests and reputation. Option A. Immediately halt all project activities pending a lengthy internal investigation, without engaging external expertise. Option B. Conduct a brief internal review by the project management team to confirm adherence to existing permits and dismiss the allegations as unfounded. Option C. Initiate an immediate, comprehensive, and independent environmental impact assessment conducted by external, accredited specialists to verify the allegations and identify any necessary corrective actions. Option D. Publicly deny all allegations and proceed with the project as planned, relying on internal assurances of compliance. Correct answer is C. Initiate an immediate, comprehensive, and independent environmental impact assessment conducted by external, accredited specialists to verify the allegations and identify any necessary corrective actions. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Webuild SP.A. to navigate a situation where a significant project, crucial for its strategic growth, is being scrutinized for potential environmental noncompliance. The challenge lies in balancing the company's commercial objectives with its legal and ethical obligations to adhere to environmental regulations. A hasty or dismissive approach could lead to severe legal penalties, reputational damage, and project delays, while an overly cautious approach might unnecessarily hinder progress. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are both legally sound and ethically responsible, maintaining stakeholder trust. The correct approach involves a thorough, independent investigation into the environmental concerns raised. This means engaging qualified environmental consultants to conduct a detailed assessment of the project's impact and compliance with all applicable environmental laws and regulations. The findings of this independent review should then inform a clear action plan to address any identified noncompliance, which may include implementing mitigation measures, revising project plans, or engaging with regulatory bodies. This approach is correct because it prioritizes adherence to the law and ethical environmental stewardship, as mandated by regulatory frameworks governing corporate environmental responsibility. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency and proactive problem-solving, aligning with principles of good corporate governance and sustainability expected of a company like Webuild SP.A. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the concerns without proper investigation, perhaps due to pressure to meet project deadlines or cost targets. This failure to investigate constitutes a direct disregard for environmental regulations and a potential breach of due diligence. It exposes Webuild SP.A. to significant legal risks, including fines and injunctions, and severely damages its reputation as a responsible corporate citizen. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial internal review without independent verification. While seemingly efficient, this approach lacks the objectivity and expertise necessary to definitively assess environmental compliance. It risks overlooking critical issues or misinterpreting regulatory requirements, leading to continued noncompliance and potential future liabilities. This approach fails to meet the standard of care expected in environmental matters and undermines the credibility of any findings. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to immediately halt the project based on unsubstantiated concerns without a proper assessment. While appearing cautious, this can lead to significant financial losses, contractual disputes, and damage to stakeholder relationships. It demonstrates a lack of reasoned decision-making and an inability to balance competing interests effectively. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledge and document the concerns raised. Second, assess the potential severity and scope of the issues. Third, determine the appropriate level of investigation, often involving independent expertise. Fourth, gather all relevant information and evidence. Fifth, analyze the findings against applicable legal and regulatory requirements. Sixth, develop and implement a clear, actionable plan to address any identified issues. Finally, communicate transparently with relevant stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, throughout the process. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both legal obligations and ethical responsibilities. Question 20. Quality control measures reveal minor non-critical deviations in the concrete mix consistency as specific pour site for a Webuild SP.A. infrastructure project. The project is under significant time pressure to meet a key milestone. What is the most appropriate course of action for the site engineer? Option A. Immediately document the deviations and initiate the formal corrective action process as per Webuild SP.A.'s quality management system. Option B. Proceed with the pour, assuming the deviations are insignificant and will not impact the overall project integrity, and address them later if they become problematic. Option C. Adjust the mix on subsequent pours to compensate for the minor deviations observed, without formal documentation of the initial issue. Option D. Inform the construction supervisor verbally about the deviations and request their informal guidance on whether to proceed. The correct answer is A. Immediately document the deviations and initiate the formal corrective action process as per Webuild SP.A.'s S. Quality Management System. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Webuild SP employees due to the inherent conflict between achieving project deadlines and adhering to stringent quality control protocols. The pressure to deliver on time can tempt individuals to overlook minor deviations, but the company's commitment to quality and regulatory compliance necessitates a rigorous approach. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands, ensuring that neither quality nor ethical standards are compromised. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the identified quality deviations, regardless of their perceived severity, and initiating the formal corrective action process as outlined in Webuild S.P.A.'s internal quality management system and relevant industry standards. This approach is correct because it upholds the company's commitment to delivering high-quality work, which is a fundamental ethical and professional obligation. It also aligns with regulatory expectations for construction projects, which mandate thorough quality assurance and control to ensure safety, durability, and compliance with specifications. By following the established procedures, employees demonstrate integrity and accountability, safeguarding the company's reputation and mitigating potential risks associated with substandard work. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the deviations as minor and proceed without formal documentation or corrective action. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses established quality control mechanisms, potentially leading to cumulative defects that could compromise the structural integrity or functionality of the project. Ethically, it represents a failure to act with due diligence and a disregard for the company's stated quality objectives. Furthermore, it could expose Webuild SP.A. to significant legal liabilities and reputational damage if the deviations are later discovered, and lead to project failures or safety incidents. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to rectify the deviations informally without involving the designated quality control personnel or following the documented corrective action procedure. This is problematic as it lacks transparency and accountability. Informal fixes may not be adequately verified, could introduce new issues, and do not create a traceable record of the problem and its resolution, which is crucial for audits and future learning. This undermines the systematic nature of quality management and can lead to inconsistent application of standards. The professional reasoning framework for such situations involves a clear understanding of the company's quality management system, relevant industry best practices, and ethical codes of conduct. When faced with quality deviations, professionals should 1. Identify and accurately document the deviation. 2. Assess the potential impact of the deviation on project quality, safety, and compliance. 3. Follow the established procedures for reporting and initiating corrective actions. 4. Collaborate with relevant stakeholders, including quality control personnel and project management, to ensure appropriate resolution. 5. Maintain clear and transparent communication throughout the process. This systematic approach ensures that quality issues are addressed effectively and ethically, reinforcing professional responsibility and protecting the interests of all parties involved.